Welcome to the BIOMIN Mycotoxin Prediction Update for June 8th, 2020. I'm Tim Jenkins from the Digital Lab at BIOMIN Austria. Winter wheat harvest is coming soon in southern areas of Europe, and the time for corn silking is approaching fast. Let's look at what the risk levels are like in your part of Europe this year. This table shows the percentage of samples that are predicted to be above the BIOMIN risk threshold. The thresholds for each mycotoxin are given below the table. Looking first at corn, and in Central Europe, the highest risk is DON at 90%, with a reasonably high predicted risk also for XEN at 53%. Interestingly for this area, there is a higher prediction than normal for AFLA. This is a characteristically warm region mycotoxin. This risk is seen largely in parts of Romania and Hungary, both countries included here in Central Europe. In Eastern Europe, DON is again the greatest risk, with some co-contamination risk of XEN also. For Northern Europe, mycotoxin levels in corn are characteristically lower, but there is still a reasonable risk of DON being above the risk threshold. There is also some risk of the associated XEN. DON is also the highest risk in Southern Europe, but FUM, AFLA and XEN are all relatively high risk compared to the other regions. We will need to see later on in the season how bad the hot and dry conditions might get that could increase the risk of AFLA further in this region. For wheat, some of the southern areas have already had anthesis or flowering for winter wheat. This gives us more confidence in these predictions because we know the actual weather conditions that were at the time of anthesis. Anthesis is the main risk period for the establishment of DON and XEN producing Fusarium fungi. The risk of DON is reasonably high in all regions, but with the highest risk predicted so far in Northern Europe, where we are experiencing some wetter conditions this month than normal, and this could coincide with anthesis in some of these areas. Zearalenone risk is present in all regions, with the highest levels predicted for Eastern and Northern Europe. In this slide, we see a picture of wheat anthesis on the top left, with the black arrow indicating a male anther exposed from the head of the wheat. These anthers are the only entry point for Fusarium head blight fungi. These are the fungi that produce DON and XEN mycotoxins. These fungi need to enter the anthers typically within 2 weeks from the start of anthesis, and they need rain during that time for germination, the infection, and spread down into the grain. We are also interested in rainfall after anthesis because some anthers remain only partially exposed from the head. See the bottom left picture with the white arrow. This represents a risk for Fusarium head blight fungi some weeks after anthesis. On the right side, the map of Europe shows typical anthesis time for winter sown wheat. The time varies from as early as March, darker green, in some very southern areas, to as late as June in more northern areas, indicated by the brightest yellow areas. In these slides, the left-hand slide shows anthesis dates and the right-hand side harvest dates for winter wheat in Europe. Harvest does not start until late May at the very earliest, and that is just in a few areas. Looking first at late March, average winter wheat anthesis in this period is highlighted in black and is only present in a few scattered areas. See the blue arrows for southern Spain, Sardinia and Greece. If we look at what the rainfall was like at that time, we see higher numbers of rainy days in some of those southern areas. This is a map designed by the Digital Lab using IBM weather data. The more green the area, the more rainy days. In some of those Areas of southern Spain, the majority of days had rain events. A rainy day is defined here as having 3 or more hours with some rainfall. This can be sufficient for establishment of the Fusarium head blight fungi. Now looking at early April, even more areas of Spain, Italy, southern France and Greece can have winter wheat anthesis. We see again some rainy days in Spain and parts of Greece, but less in Italy, apart from the very south. Moving into late April, most parts of Spain, southern France, Italy, and much of Greece will have been in anthesis for winter wheat. This would also affect the Balkan areas, but this map only highlights the European Union countries from 2012. In late April, there is a great spread of higher rainy day occurrence, including some of those anthesis areas in southern central, and southern eastern Europe. In early May, there would be anthesis still in some parts of southern Europe, and also further north into France and southern eastern Europe. The weather had dried up by this time in many of the southern areas, but in many parts of France and southern eastern Europe, there were conditions conducive to Fusarium head blight. By late May, we typically expect anthesis in some parts of northern areas and even scattered parts of UK and Ireland. Some of the early harvests can start in a few parts of, for example, southern Spain. See the blue arrow on the right-hand side. There were plenty of rain days in northern and western UK and Ireland at this time, and more towards the east of Europe as well, all the way from north to south, with quite a few rain days in particular in areas of Belarus and Russia, increasing the risk of mycotoxin-producing diseases getting established on wheat and anthesis in those areas. By early June, we will have anthesis in more winter wheat crops in central and northern parts of Europe, as well as some more harvest in southern parts. If we look at the 30-day forecast, we see some indications already for the risk in these areas. This rainfall map is a bit different from the other. Here we have mapped the extra rain that is forecast compared to normal for this period of the year. The greener the area, the more extra millimeters of rain forecast for this 30 days. The more orange an area, the drier the period is forecast compared to normal. For late wheat in southern Europe, and to some extent England, still in anthesis at this time, we would expect a lower mycotoxin risk than usual for these early crops. In some of the earlier developing southern areas, the drier conditions may assist with ripening, helping improve grain quality, but care should still be taken because mycotoxins produced by the earlier disease establishment could still be present in these grains, of course. On the other hand, around many areas of the Baltic, northern Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia, northwestern Russia, Finland, southwestern Sweden, Norway, Denmark, and also Scotland, northern areas of parts of the Republic of Ireland and Northern Ireland, higher rainfall is forecast, indicating an increased risk of mycotoxin-producing fungi establishing. We are also interested in the effect of temperature. This is actually quite uniform this month, with a consistently higher temperature forecast to normal for most areas of Europe, about 1 degree on average higher. In the UK and Ireland, the forecast is a bit more like 0.5 to 0.6 degrees above normal. This may not sound like a lot, but because it's the average over the whole 30 days, it can make a big difference in speeding up crop development, and also means that fungi can establish and grow faster. And it is likely that the risk of warm region mycotoxins like fumonisins and aflatoxins could increase. The further we forecast out, and for a longer period now, it is harder to see big differences compared to normal. But with this 31 to 90-day forecast, we get the first glimpse of what the outlook for corn is. The silking or flowering period of corn is the first main period of vulnerability for the establishment of mycotoxin-producing fungi. This happens quite a bit later than wheat anthesis. The early indications are that there could be some hotspots due to wetter conditions than normal in parts of Romania, northern Portugal, central France, southern England, and southern Turkey. The significance of this we will need to check with actual weather data and how this coincides with crop stages. Some drier areas around Estonia, Latvia, northwestern Russia, as well as southeastern France, northwestern Italy, Corsica, Sardinia, and Sicily indicate somewhat lower risk than normal. Corn silking is a critical time for the establishment of some of the mycotoxin-producing fungi. Fusarium verticilioides in particular, shown here on the bottom left, often travels down the silks and gets into the corn grain that way. On the right-hand side, there is a map showing some typical silking dates for various parts of Europe. Indicated in black with the blue arrows, there's a small part of southern Spain and also Cyprus, where silking can already occur in June. For most of the rest of Europe, corn silking typically occurs from July through to early August. If we look now again at wheat, and on the BIOMIN mycotoxin prediction website itself, we see that predictions for wheat DON include apparent hotspots in England and Wales, Denmark and Sweden, and a northern part of Italy and over in Moldova. For zearalenone, the risk is comparatively lower, but with some hotspots in parts of northern and eastern Europe. In corn now, DON is generally higher risk throughout Europe, and zearalenone is also comparatively higher risk compared to in wheat. Fumonisin, on the other hand, are predicted to be more of a risk in the warmer southern European areas, though extending northwards in some parts of western France and over in some more eastern parts of Europe. The risk of AFLA is more restricted to the southern regions, though with hotspots predicted at this stage in parts of Ukraine, Romania and Hungary. The yellow colour helps confirm that predictions for much of Central Europe are low to moderate for AFLA, but these high predictions in parts of Romania and Hungary are lifting up the overall average AFLA prediction for Central Europe. Keep tuned in for weekly European mycotoxin prediction updates as we get closer to the main wheat harvest and corn silking period.